Hi there, and welcome to Pod Rocket. I'm your host, Paul, and today we have Segun Adebayo, also known as Sage. And Segun is a software engineer at Vercel, currently working on a very interesting React component library called Chakra UI, Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. I mean, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We just did another podcast recently about front-end interfaces and component libraries and what it's like from a design system engineer's standpoint about building one of these out. And they were actually bringing up Chakra UI, talking about how it is one of the fastest ways that you can get an accessible and really well methodical design out. Like who would have thought whenever you started your career that you're gonna be on a podcast and somebody's gonna go, hey, that thing you made, like other people are talking about it and it's awesome. Good. Because it is awesome. So when do you start thinking about Chakra UI? Is this a project that are you still working on? And when did it come to your idea to make it?
Yeah, for sure. By the way, thanks for the remark. I mean, working on Chakra UI has been like a huge privilege, and I'm definitely grateful to work on a project like this. So I'd say like the idea for Chakra UI maybe came to me. I think it'd be like 5 years ago from now. Basically, I was working with a couple of colleagues. So, just a quick recap. I used to freelance remotely. So I work at the time I used to work as a product designer, and then I designed UIs with Figma and Sketch, and then I had like lots of colleagues because I work remotely. I had like two or three different teams that I work with simultaneously. So I go in there and I just design it in a Figma, and I'm pretty much done. So if you give me in a whole week, I can spend 2 days in the week to finish up the design. And if I ship that off to my engineering colleagues, if it took me 2 days, there's a high chance it would take them 2 weeks, if not 2 months, to actually get the design live in production. So, I mean, learning through that painful journey of taking design to code sort of helped me and sort of like sparked the initial idea of like, what if we could build a tool that could help engineers go just as fast as design, basically. How can we help people write code at the speed of design, which is like the common phrase I like to use when I describe Chakra UI, right? And not just help them write code, help them write composable, accessible code out of the box. So that was like the initial challenge that I had with Chakra UI, and it started off as a side experiment. Let me just try to see if this could work out, and showing it to two of my friends back then. And I literally saw the light bulb in their eyes, like, dude, this is actually really cool. Why can't you just take this and like, I mean, blow it up beyond what it is right now? I was literally very scared at the time, to be honest. But then I just like took the thing. I'm like, okay, what does blowing it up mean? Does it mean maybe I just use it in my project and just keep it so no one knows about it, or does it mean taking it out there to the public in spite of the fear to see like if other people would use this library? So I decided to take the second route, and today it's history basically, as they say.
So back in the day, 5 years plus ago, before Chakra UI, you were working at the designer level. So you were kind of thinking about how's the user going to interact with my components with the platform, and then actually drawing them out in Figma and sort of like getting them ready for developers who would then implement your designs. Or were you actually writing the components and the JavaScript to implement your designs?
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the time, I was mostly just doing the design. So it was largely doing the design, designing the components and the variants of that component, documenting those variants in Figma, and
Mm-hmm.
then like shipping them off with InVision. Basically, just like take all those tools and just like put it out there, and then watch the developers take that design and turn that into code, right? So, I mean, initially it was just pure UI design work, and I think that one of the key things that I've learned from, I mean, being a designer, which is a huge privilege if you ask me, is that you can take a lot of the design practices, you can sort of like fold them up and actually like bring them into code. So it's like, I think that there's lots of amazing functionalities in tools like Figma, for example. Right, these days you see that there's so many amazing features in Figma. Imagine if you could take all of those amazing features and make them available to developers in code. You can imagine the kind of speed and productivity that would yield.
So, and I imagine you're coming from a very design first approach here because you were a designer first. So you probably, you have all these ideas and standards and just you've went through the gamut with what could be right and wrong as a designer. Now you're bringing that into code because I feel like normally in component libraries I've used and seen, it's people who already write websites who are making a UI library to just like make it fast and easy, sort of. It's coders who are making you this, but now you're a designer who's stepping into the code realm. So it probably has. Do you think that there are some ways that Chakra UI immediately differentiates itself from something like Material UI or Bootstrap? And if you could touch on some of those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most of these tools definitely serve. I mean, they serve a purpose most of the time. So, and in in this engineering field, software engineering in general, it's literally about trade-offs, pros and cons. You just have to consider like all of them, right? So, I think Chakra UI. I mean, there's a slight difference between a component library and just a styling framework. I think that's like a clear-cut difference there. So, if you take something like Bootstrap, for example, I'll put that in the bucket of more like a styling framework. They do have a couple of JavaScript here and there to help you, but they're largely dependent of like giving you the tools to help you style your components faster. Right. On the other end of the spectrum, you have component libraries. So these are whole like full blown ecosystem of components that you can actually use to actually like, I mean, create a website or an app. So it comes with state management, it comes with accessibility, it comes with styling, it comes with like all of these different like TypeScript, server-side rendering consideration. So it goes on and on like that. So this is a full-blown suite of components. And I would say maybe I'll put Chakra UI and Material UI in that box. I mean, when it comes to like what really differentiates Chakra UI, I'd say I lean heavily on my design background, just like you said. So it's like there's a lot of things that I learned working with different clients, working on different design projects, that I'm then like taking all of this knowledge and experience and bringing it into code. I mean, it's a common joke. Should designers know how to code? I think if designers knew how to code, it would really help that collaboration process. And I think that if designers eventually become developers, they'll be a lot better developers than the typical front end engineers that we have today.
I also feel like design feels like one of those things that uses that side of your brain that is, more creative. And that side of the brain, the earlier on, I mean, you could do anything at any point in life, but my weird own personal belief is that earlier on in life that you start doing something creative, the more you just live and breathe and really understand that like element, whether it be like music or something. So design, if you start there and then you move into development, I can imagine how you just totally look at development differently, less modular and less rigid. That's one problem I have whenever I try to put together a website. We were chatting before the podcast started, and I was saying, yeah, all my websites look like trash because I do it as a developer, and I'm making everything in boxes and modular and stuff, and just lacking that design background. So, do you think if people came from design as a more standard approach into computer programming, would that change the web, or do you think it could really reach into all breadths of how software is written and designed?
Yeah, I think I'd say design can help, and design can having some sort of design experience can enhance that development workflow. I would not say like it's a core requirement to sort of get into engineering, but you definitely be a better developer if you had some design experience, because one of the key things or one of the key ingredients when it comes to design to development workflow is speaking the same language as designers and product managers, right? So, and the only way that you can do that is if you have some sort of like deep experience in design, or you sort of know the lingua of design and can speak the same language as other people. And I think that design gives you that like one of the key things is like being creative and using your imagination to sort of like bring something to life before even drawing the first rectangle on the screen, right? So basically, I think that part of your brain is also helpful when you're trying to solve like difficult problems. You can basically imagine the components before you actually make it. And I think that helps with things like API design. How should you name stuff? So it's like if you can imagine and think about and put yourself in the shoes of the person that's going to use it, which is empathy in the design language. Basically, if you just like practice a bit more empathy which I mean is heavily consumed. If you're a designer, you basically have to be in the shoes of the person that's gonna use the app or the website and try to design from that perspective. I think doing that a lot would help you be a better developer for sure.
But you should write a book someday. Like you should write one of those like O'Reilly programming books that all the pros write at some. It'll be called like a designer's approach to computer programming, and then every we can start to change the world one cell at a time.
For
Uh,
sure.
so let's actually talk about some details about this awesome UI component library and framework that you made, Chakra UI. Get into the details a little bit more. Um, what's one of the ways that you're approaching design and an API for people to use laying out their components that you are employing with Chakra UI that you think is like missing or misconceived, or it's a paradigm that just like you were like, okay, I'm going to make this and I'm going to do it right this time? What's an area like that you try to tackle with Chakra UI?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say like there are two main areas that we try to tackle, and I think this literally comes from again just thinking about like when people want to build applications, what do they really need? What do they need in the short term? What do they need in the in the long run when they have a much larger team, when they have like much funding, the team is super big now. It's like I think those are two different phases of a company or a startup, basically, right? So if we take it that if we sort of see it from that perspective, we see that like when you're just starting out, basically what you need is a set of components that can sort of like help you move really fast, right? And obviously, depending on the type of application you're building, you basically want to make sure that it's themable, it's accessible, it's really easy to use, right? So I mean, starting out, you just want to get these little like Lego bricks or Lego blocks and just like put them together to sort of like make your website look amazing. Right. So that's like the first criteria. I mean, how can we basically give people the set of tools and components that they need to build their website to their applications with speed at the beginning, obviously. And then as you go down the line, it sort of switches from I want to build my website really fast to now I have a team that can actually manage and orchestrate the design and the UI of my application. How do we create a structured system? This is where the term design system then comes into play. How do we create some sort of like living, breathing system of our brand, of our identity, to make sure like everything looks consistent, everything looks coherent and cohesive across the application? Then comes the theming aspect of a design of a framework, basically. So Chakra UI takes this initial phase of giving you the building blocks you need to build really fast. And then when you grow to, I mean, also giving you the set of tools that you need to build a design system from ground up. And basically, I mean, you can easily sort of like switch design systems between brands if you have like a multi-brand application, for example, right? So all of these different needs are baked into Chakra UI from the very beginning.
And do you feel like the way that Chakra UI handles this living, breathing ecosystem is where do you think it shines the most in terms of its ability to grow, or its ability to, does it like plug into Figma? Is there cool connectors and ways to extend the design system? Like, what are some ways that people can extend it once they get up and running with it?
Yeah, for sure. So Chakra UI has a theming system. I mean, largely developer focused for now. I mean, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to plug into design tools and be able to sort of like pick all the tokens and send them over to code. That would be really cool. But right now, it's largely developer focused API. So we have like a theming API that feels very similar to the way Figma works these days. So it's basically you have a component has different visual styles or variants. So if you have a button, the button can be solid, it can be outline, or it can also have different sizes, right? So it can be small, it can be large, and then it goes on and on like that. So basically, we design this type of like API within Chakra UI to say if you want to build a design system using Chakra UI, this is our theming API, which looks very similar to, I mean, how you would do that within Figma or Sketch or any design tool.
What are some areas that you're looking to tackle next in terms of development of Chakra UI? Are there any components that you don't have yet that are close on the list? Are there any, you know, shifts in new ways we theme things, or areas that people have requested that you don't think Chakra UI will ever go in?
Yeah, I think Chakra UI has like endless possibilities here. But it's like I think the core focus that we have right now, there are two main areas. One of them is multi-framework. So the people that have like Chakra UI is heavily React right now. We have a small team of folks trying to help us get Vue up and running. But that's been not as fast as we want. But basically, like, how do we also have quite a bunch of people that are, asking for React Native. And it's like, okay, this is getting really interesting because, like, for every single component we build, for every single API we create, we need to start to think beyond React and start to think like a whole ecosystem and trying to provide the same set of APIs, across these different frameworks. So this has been one of the biggest challenges so far. And to solve that, one of the things we've done recently is to think about like what are the different parts of a component library like that we currently have, and we know that like the two key areas are like the logic of the component and the styling of that component, right? So if we can take these two things and sort of like put them apart, and then try to figure out like how do we solve these key pieces in a way that is not exactly tied to any framework, right? So we started off with the logic piece. If you wanted to design a drop down or a menu component, like there's so much like keyword accessibility, focus management, and all of those things you need to take into consideration when you're building a component like that. So the question then becomes, how do we model the logic of something like a menu component in a way that is truly framework agnostic, that we can share across all these different JavaScript frameworks? So to help us like get farther in that direction, we launched a new library called Zag.js, which basically is a state machine based library. So state charts basically is a long living concept that's been around for years, but it's just getting introduced to the web space in general. So we're taking ideas from this industry, from this pattern, and then using this to build a model or component logic to help us achieve this goal super fast, right? So that's one part of the equation. The other half is styling. Styling is like the other bit where we're looking into ways to make sure like our styling solution is like super fast and efficient. Specifically, Chakra UI is based on CSS and JS right now, so it basically means that there's a little bit of runtime overhead if you have like a super performance sensitive application. But quite frankly, most apps never really get to experience this. Except you're building something that literally renders 1 million times in a second, and then it becomes like super obvious. But I think that either ways, I think we need to like strive to boost the performance and sort of keep improving that and stretch it as far as we can, right? So that's one other key area that we're looking into, and at the same time, try to make it framework agnostic. So these are the key challenges that we are faced with right now. I think that they are forward thinking challenges in the sense that once it's solved, it's basically solved forever. So basically, if there are new frameworks that come up in the next 5 years, we don't have to start rewiring or rewriting everything in our framework to actually support that. We basically have two systems that are framework agnostic and can serve basically every developer out there.
I mean, it sounds like you're solving a very grandiose thing here. I mean, the problem at hand is realistically, how do we make a platform for a design system that is framework agnostic? And now you're answering all these like very meta questions about the way we
Yes,
hash out information and organize it in this modern development landscape. I mean, this is I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you make a way to make it framework agnostic in the vision that you have, you could slap another component library on there and build it with that same paradigm and make another one that's completely framework agnostic once you solve these challenges.
exactly. I think this is very similar to the way design works as well, right? If you wanted to design a mobile application or you wanted to design a website, like Figma literally doesn't care about that. It's just like go in there, drag the frame for the iPhone or drag the frame for the desktop and just design based on how you can imagine, literally. I think that that's the same ideas we want to bring into the web as well, where you don't have to be tied into like a specific framework like React or Vue. Like you can basically think more broadly about like how do I want to model this system and how do I want to style this system. Basically, I think that will really go a long way in helping like shape the future of design systems in general.
Do you think that your project Chakra is tackling this general idea faster than the other big name component libraries out there right now?
I mean, I don't have like inside, so I'll say like inside gist into what's going on in all these other big names for
Gotcha.
sure.
Okay.
But I mean, I probably will not have like a thorough enough answer to that. But we're doing our best to sort of like go at our own pace, because like it's at the end of the day, it's open source, right? So it's open source. You have a bunch of like, I mean, dedicated maintainers that want to help you build a thing. So it's like we just keep going out at the pace that we can to actually like achieve this goal. But either way, I think it would be really nice and awesome to see like other people try to tackle the same set of problems, so we can learn from ourselves and sort of like improve and grow faster together.
Now, did you open source it just because of the general notion that, oh, if you open source something, you get these dedicated contributors and it'll be the best it can be? Are there any other reasons why you open source it? Because I know, for example, to harp back on Material UI, they have a paid like pro version or something like that that I know you can subscribe to. So, what were your motivations for making Chakra free and open source?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to like motivation, it's a whole like different set of like topic. Like when you bring in like motivation and open source, I think those two words are very big, and when combined together, like there's a whole lot of things that can go into those two topics, in there. But I would say like for me, Chakra UI started more like a passion project. I just had this idea. I thought it'd be super cool to actually try out a different approach to the idea, right? So most of my colleagues mentioned to me that they tried Material CSS and even Material UI. And it was pretty hard to sort of like tweak the styles or make it work the way they wanted, right? So and it's like I just thought about, so imagine if it was possible to build a system like that is like super easy, just as flexible as Figma, and you can basically style it the way you want. Like it doesn't matter if this button component was made in Figma as a component, you can bring that component in, detach the component, change the styles anyhow you want. So imagine if you could bring this experience into code. How would that look like? So Chakra UI is just like the first attempt to actually like, I mean, bring this imagined solution to the, I mean, to the world to see if this could actually work. But so far, I think it's doing pretty well. We definitely have ideas to improve it even more. I'm excited to see where that leads.
I think a lot of times what we could call opinionated frameworks, such as what I would probably consider Chakra UI or Material UI, sometimes they get a bad rep of people saying, oh, you're kind of like pigeonholed into just doing this one thing. And the fact that you're specifically mentioning, no, we want to make this composable, changeable, easy for a developer to customize it is really paramount to making an opinionated framework like awesome. I like opinionated frameworks personally just because I'm not a designer, so using them is really simple. But there's a huge pain point that you mentioned, which is like Material UI. Like, oh gosh, trying to override stuff in that framework, it just like it can turn into like a 3 hour head scratcher of like what like why is my explanation point important not applying, and then you want to like flip the table. So having that ability to override, compose, make things custom as much as you want, I think is really exciting to hear about in a opinion first framework like Chakra, because you can step in and have it look great like you said right off the bat,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then move into more customization.
Yeah, exactly. This definitely like not to sort of like, I mean, bring down the folks at Material UI, but I think that Material UI is a great framework. I do see that they're making efforts to actually make this system actually more composable, right? So I just had to like drop that in because like at the end of the day, we learn from each other. We try to grow as an ecosystem, right? So different frameworks is basically equal to different approaches to the same problem. So it's just, I mean, we're trying to learn from each other. And I think for Chakra UI, it's a little bit interesting because, like, again, when we imagine like the phase of a company, I always think about it from like the growth stage of a company. It's like at the end of the day, it might feel like it's a single developer that is using Chakra UI, but usually, if your product or your idea is successful, it quickly moves from a single person to two to 20 to 300. And then the goal is, how do I make sure my framework actually scales all the way to the end, regardless of how big this company grows, right? And we start with like opinion first, which is like we have like a way of doing things. I mean, for example, you can easily spin up your own button component by using the Chakra UI box component, add some styles to that, and then you're done. Right? You made your own button component, right? I mean, that's an opinionated way of designing a button. But then as you grow in size, you have your own design team, you have your own design system for your company. There's a way you want to work. You want to stay away from the opinions and be able to model your system the way you want. So, and then we want Chakra UI to be able to get out of the way at that point and just give you like a very simple, basic API that you can work with to build your own opinions on top of. Right. So these two different ideas is basically what's behind Chakra UI today. And I think that this, I mean, contributes a whole lot to why people love it, why people use it. But then these ideas will definitely improve over time even more.
Is Chakra UI being used in any arms or tributaries of Vercel right
Uh,
now?
yeah, right now I just joined recently, so I mean, when I got in, obviously now at the moment, but hey,
Hmm.
I mean, never can tell what will happen in the future.
Yeah, I feel like Vercel is known to sort of get into open source projects, either grandfather them in or use them and contribute to support contributors to them. So yeah, maybe it'll end up there sooner than you think.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure. I'm excited. I'm definitely like, I mean, open to that. I'm looking forward to that happening. Obviously.
are there any cool uses of Chakra UI that you might want to point viewers to if people want to go look at a really good use case of it?
Yeah, for sure. Give me a moment. Let me just like pull up a document that sort of like shows like all the different like use cases. I know a couple of like websites that use Chakra UI today. I'll probably drop a link to a few of them. But then one of them is stockx.com. And then we also have Bitwarden, the password manager. That's also
Mm-hmm.
like a pretty cool use case of Chakra UI. And then when I came here, so currently I reside in Dubai. Right, so one of the things that brought me over here to Dubai is there's a big e-commerce company sponsored by the Dubai government that basically wanted to start off with a big design system from the start. So I basically came in to help integrate Chakra UI into the core of the product, and now it's the second biggest e-commerce company in the UAE. So that website is yeah, so that website is tradelink.com. I'm going to send the link as well. So that is like a full-fledged Chakra UI website with RTL, LTR support baked in. I mean, coming here and doing the work here basically helped me also like get Chakra UI working in RTL, right to left languages like Arabic and Hebrew and things like that. Because like it literally helped me broaden my scope a bit more and further than just English.
Now, this company that you mentioned in the UAE, you said they want to start out from the get go with a big, well thought out design system. What do you think of that approach that they took? Because I know a lot of people, they say like you want to start quick and iterate and then understand how your like layout and components sort of behave with your customer use case or your internal use case and then go from there. Like, do you think that it's time well spent to really buckle down and figure out the design system from day zero like that?
Yeah, I'd say like when I came in, I think the company was 2 months old, and they already had some working system prototype without the design system. So I'd say maybe that counts for the idea you're talking about. So it's like okay, but then I mean it was like 2 months old, zero customers. So it's like okay, I mean I'm not sure if that really counts 100%, but I think it definitely counts for prototyping your idea really fast. And then coming in, I think I mean I'd say like the answer really depends on the company and the ambition. here. The ambition is slightly different because this is a company backed by government. That's like they're gonna give you like everything you need from a money perspective, from strategy perspective. It's gonna be big already. So you're not trying to test the market to see if you're gonna grow or stuff like that. So if the ambition is really big, then it makes sense to actually make sure you get the foundations right before the company explodes from 20 people to 10,000 people in just like 1 or 2 years. So you have to actually get those foundations right.
All right. Well, we're getting up on time here. Sage, is there any resources that you would want to point our listeners to? If there's like YouTubers that use Chakra UI that have good tutorials, your documentation, or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a few things. We have like an egghead course on Chakra UI, so you can go there. Just go to egghead.io, type in Chakra UI in there. You see like a full blown course. Next year's with Chakra UI and just a plain old Chakra UI for beginners course. And there's also another website called Chakra UI for beginners.com. You can actually go in there to actually learn the basics of Chakra UI and get started pretty fast. We're working on a course for design system folks. So it's like, how do you build a design system from scratch with Chakra UI? So that's something we're also working on. When I talked about our approach to making sure we model component logic in a framework agnostic way, we released a framework last month called ZagJS. So you can go to zagjs.com to see
How do you
what that
spell that?
framework. ZagJS. So it's a Zag, ZAG JS.com.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
So that's it. So you can go on there to see what that looks like. I mean, how do you model components with state charts and state machines? If you're curious, you can go in there to see the framework we built around that. I think that's about it to get started with Chakra UI.
Great. And is there any shout outs you want to give or any socials you want to drop? If some people like Twitter, they'll give to reach the followings.
Yeah, for sure. You can follow me on Twitter at the Segun Adebayo, or you can search for Sage. And I mean, you probably like see me in a few Sages on Twitter in there. I think that you can. I mean, for shout outs, I definitely want to give a huge props to the Chakra UI team. I always tell to this almost every time I talk in public because I think that Chakra UI and the vision that we have is pretty big. And because it's open source, there's a tendency that you might want to burn out in that process because we're trying to solve a very, very big problem. So it's like, I mean, just getting that passion and motivation to keep going in open source is pretty hard, right? I definitely always love to give a shout out, applying the spotlight to the core maintainers of Chakra UI, both React and Vue. I said, this is a shout out from me. Thank you, guys.
That's an awesome shout out. Well, thank you for your time, for coming on and talking about Chakra UI and your experiences as a designer and engineer, Segun. It was great having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Paul. I think I enjoyed this.
Awesome. Take care.